Hey guys, so this is episode 3. Yesterday I was going through what we're going through the next steps of just doing all of the water rules, the hydrology for the model, because that's the kind of the base that builds up. So yesterday we redid the terrain, and I ended up with hills and stuff, and running the water model before the whole hydrology changes. You could see it was kind of flowing and it's kind of cool. So now we've implemented the hydrology and we're trying to fine tune it to where I can get water flowing on the system, but also water soaking in. And one of the things that you can see here, I'm dropping about 3 centimeters of water onto the ground every tick. So every 10 minutes there's 3 centimeters of water falling on the ground. So I just did 10 cycles, and this is where it's all stacking up. You can see that we now have water flowing. It fills up. You can see it's been draining here down into this valley, and it collects along the edge of the map. If I go over here, there's a small hill here that dips down into the edge of the map, and so the water's collecting here, as you can see. And the cycle's ended, so now the water's absorbing ground, it's flowing off, and it's catching into this channel. This is a channel where water should collect, and as it comes down the hill, there's a basin area, and so this will be one of the last places. So water's starting to flow. It's not quite flowing like I want. If I start clicking on cells here, my soil water level is only like 16% here. It should be 100% with the amount of water I've been dropping on. So the absorption into the ground isn't high enough, so most of the water is just flowing, which we wanted to test flow. And what we're seeing is that the channels where I should see like a stream eventually, once we get water tables up correctly in all the soil, that the water should flow into these streams and keep flowing. And as the map gets bigger, then it would flow off into the distance. We're just dealing with a 64 by 64 grid. So one of the good things with this development that I found is that I got the instructions from the LLM. The agent programmed it in, and after seeing it, it was like, okay, I want to control a test and see what information. And with this now, I can have the agent programmed to put down exactly the same amount of water on every square and let it flow, and then we can capture the stats on every square. And instead of me having to do all the analysis and do time series analysis on everything, I could have it all outputted to these test files and turn it back over to the LLM and let it do the analysis and come back with the results. And since it's already been working with the problem, it can say, these are the results from what I gave you. Now this is where we can make adjustments. And so we've made some adjustments, and I'm looking at what the next steps are going to be, because we got to fine tune the water first. But here we are. We're probably about 10-20 ticks later after I did the last rain. You can see water still collecting here, and I still have water here. And you can just kind of imagine that this is like a downhill stream where water constantly flows down the hill and collects down here in this basin. So this would turn into like a little lake or a pond once we start adding erosion. So some of the when you start building these worlds, it's a rough world. It doesn't look like the real world. If you've played Minecraft, that doesn't look like what you should expect, what you see around Earth. That's why they're dramatic. But that's where you kind of lose your sense of disbelief, is that, well, these aren't real. And by using water to help shape and erode things down and smooth things out, you will get a more realistic. I'm sure Dwarven Fortress, if it was a 3D world that you could walk through, would look more realistic than what you see in Minecraft. And that's kind of the effect that we're trying to go for, to where I can have a real world that's functioning and it follows real world behavior and logistics, and it's pretty cool. So right here, these columns of water are humongous. Let's see, let me click on a block. I think Yeah, there's 21 blocks worth of water that have piled up here. We haven't put in smoothing out. Right now we're just collecting. But one of the rules, because you can't have a column of water higher than any other place, so you'd have to flatten it out. And as you flatten it out, you're going to hit a point where it overflows, and you keep forming that way. So those are kind of going to be some of the next steps. But it's encouraging that just after a couple of hours of work, I am to the point where I have water collecting in areas after a rainfall, and it's persistent as it slowly flows. So some of the flow we don't see. These are squares that are not set as channels, but there's enough water there that it collects and it's still flowing off and flowing into these channels. And then it gets down here. And once it hits a channel and starts building up, then we start displaying the forever water. Just like if you flow rivers, usually have a consistent level that they stay at until you have like the dry season, then it lowers, and as you go into the spring, you get higher melt off and higher levels, but it stays within a channel that river's cut out. It's only when you have large rain events that it will break out of its banks. And so what we're trying to do here is just kind of establish what the channel should be, and then once you know what the average channel should be, then you can start saying that this is my water level that I should display all the time. But we'll do that programmatically to let it adjust. This is what the level should be, and since this is a channel, this is what I should be displaying for water, and let the water spread itself out like that all the time at that level. So that's the only thing. It was pretty quick. We created a test. It gives me some output files that then I load back into the LLM. The LLM analyzes it and then comes back with results and suggestions on how to adjust and change the parameters. We're going to work on a little bit more fine-tuned water absorption because, the drier the ground, the faster it should absorb water. So right now I just have a constant absorption rate that's really low to where I can force the flow. But we'll do an algorithm that will be based on the saturation of the block. Well, how much water can it intake? So if it's very low, it intakes more, but as it increases, it intakes at a slower and slower amount until it hits 100%, and then you have 100% runoff. So that way you have a rapid fill up to where it gets high enough to where like grass can grow, and if you get a little bit more rain, then trees can grow. And then if you get a whole bunch of rain all at once, that's faster than the absorption rate at any point in time, then you get a lot of flow off. Because that's the way the real world works. The ground can only absorb so fast, but when it's dry, it can absorb faster than as it's getting more moist, because water takes space. So when you look at soil, there's a lot of air in the soil that the water fills in the space of that air. And the more water you get, the less air and space there is, and so it has a harder time pressing in and soaking into the ground, and so its preference is that it'll start flowing at that point. And so that's going to be some of the next steps that we achieve to where I can get enough to where I can grow grass, because right now we're not getting absorption levels high enough to sustain grass at any point. So those are the next steps.